Yeah, you got a clock around the room. That's a big
I think
isn't it?
James, I have a email to you. Apologies. Yeah, I might be able to get up tonight. We had a big party for my daughter's graduation and 21st and so on at the weekends. Be quite lively.
Interesting to see which one.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here today. We're going to get started now. I'd like to begin basically by welcoming everyone today. So I have councillors, including some new members. I'd like to welcome Nick. I think we have really, and Mike, of course. So how can I forget you, Mike? But also to a young inspector at the end. It's lovely to have you involved, as well as our new cabinet. Oh, sorry, we have cabinet corner over here. And new executive directors and also some members of the public. I think Peter, I can see you over there, and also great to have people from Age UK here joining us as well this evening. Just to let you know that this meeting, as you can see, is being recorded and live streamed. I'm sure you also noticed that we're in a different room than we usually are. So to those online, I hope the audio visual is okay, and not ruin your enjoyment too much of today's panel. I think the first thing to say is I'm going to just mix up the agenda a little bit just to take account of people's timings for this evening. So we're going to start with the borough sport item, then we're going to move on to the community toilet scheme, and then to the executive directors, and then to the EV task force. But just before we get started, just one of the things I wanted to mention, I'm maybe you may have seen this, is at the weekend, Margaret McDonough, who is just an incredibly wonderful person in the Labour Party, passed away, and it's a real massive loss, both on a national level to all the wonderful things she did. She was the General Secretary of the Labour Party in 1997 and 2001, and not only did fantastic things on the scale, but delivered incredible landslides in those years, but also was an incredible advocate locally. I know many people in this room knew her, and just what a kind, wonderful, good-natured person she was. I don't think, I'm sure many of you may have seen the wonderful things that people like Keir Starmer, like Tony Blair, like Peter Mandelson, like Alistair Campbell all said. I don't think I can add anything that they haven't said already. But just on a personal level, I don't think there's many general secretaries of the Labour Party who would have taken the time to have someone like me invite them around to their house to help them read and go through their selection speech to try and give them a helping hand to get selected as a councillor. So she was just incredibly kind and thoughtful, and always looking out to help people. So it's a real massive shame and loss for so many people here locally and across the country as well. So I just wanted to pay tribute to her fantastic legacy. But now if we move on to the agenda, I think we just want to take any apologies for absence. I know we have one from Councillor Skeet, who's not able to join us today, so we have Councillor Caroline Charles joining us, which is fantastic. Thank you very much for stepping in. Are there any other apologies? No? Fantastic. And any declarations of interest? No. No? Fantastic. And are the minutes of the previous meeting agreed?
Only to flag for the last minute say the previous minutes weren't available for the action of I still don't think they should be long.
I believe the minutes have been uploaded to the website. The action log will be with you by the end of this week.
So that's the last action log.
That's the last action log, but we've updated with the items that went to cabinet on the 19th. So the most up to date version.
Thanks for raising that, Anthony. So I think just one thing to mention, I forgot to before, but we were initially, I think when we discussed it, selection topics for this meeting, we were going to have a number of cabinet members talk about their priorities. I mean, it turns out we've got a number of cabinet members joining us anyway, but that's going to happen at the next meeting. Just we've got quite a lot of things to get through. So without further ado, I'll move on to the community toilet scheme work, and I'll pass it over to Stephen in a second minute just to give us sort of a brief overview of some of the work that oh, sorry, it was a Borough Sport, am I right? Sorry, that's in my notes. Apologies. Thank you. Borough Sport. In that case, then, I'll pass over to Cabinet Corner, Caroline. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you everyone for having me here today. It's just been over a year since the leader announced, one of our priorities being making Merton the borough of sport. And over the last year, we've been in the background working very hard, having different conversations and meetings, because the whole idea is for Merton to be on the map for sport, and so that we can celebrate more collectively our rich sporting heritage here in the borough. And this blueprint demonstrates our commitment to achieving that. And I'm sure you've read through it already, but I just wanted to go through a few of the points that are in there. I just want to highlight a few of the points in there, and mainly that our aim is to ensure that residents, or particularly the under 16 and over 65, and those who are from less affluent communities, have access to physical activities and sport at least once a week. So that's very important to us. And it doesn't matter what sort of activity, we just want to make sure that people find what we want to make things available, different activities available, so that they can try them out and find something that they like. So whether it be walking, running, dancing, and of course those who are sporty, because when we say borough sport, we don't want people to think that, oh, they have to play sport. We all know that not everyone is sporty. And that's why I'm starting from the point of walking and dancing. But of course, those who want to pursue sport further, we want to also be there to support them and make sure that they achieve their sporting ambitions. And so the blueprint before you today, sort of fleshing out a bit of what we want to do to be able to achieve that. And a few of the points in here is, for example, we want to be able to set up a small grant that will be created and to be awarded to community groups that will be focused on supporting our core group of residents, and that's those who are under 16 and above 65 and from less affluent background. And we want to we will be providing this Get Active portal. I think that's also a very exciting part of this whole thing. So we have this portal that will be encouraging providers to upload all of the activities on there, and we will be directing residents to the portal, which will be like a one-stop shop for them to have access to all the physical activities or sporting activities that will be on there. But we want it to be populated with as many from different providers as possible, different sports across the board, and different times. We just want it to be available for people so that they have something that will work for them. We will be also creating public forums so that people will be able to have those discussions and be able to feed into what we are doing. So at the back here, if you look from page, it doesn't have a page, but the details from page 2.2, you will see some of the things that, without going into all the details, but you will see some of the things that we want to do. And I'm hoping that you've read through them and that you'll be able to ask me any questions. And we're here along with the director to answer any questions that you may have.
Sorry, Caroline. Can you want me to 2.2? I got the wrong document, but I'm going to. Is that? What
So-
different documents are, one goes up to 215 and
215 talks about exemplars. So 215 is it, things 3 exemplars?
okay, dedicated role.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I was talking from, so what we want to do starts from 2.2, so it starts from before that, where we talk about, oh yeah, dedicated rules for the borough of sport. And then, yeah, operational groups, talk about the local and yeah. And the public forum, it talks about the small grants, and all that we plan to do for us to become the borough of sport. And since I mean, we now have the blueprint that has gone through cabinet. So this sort of gave us, well, we've been pushed forward a little bit more. So we haven't, it's going through cabinet, but we want you to have an input as well. We want you to ask questions, but also if you have any input, so we'll be able to take that on board. But over the last year, we've been working very hard on the blueprint, but it's not just been the blueprint that we've been working on. We've also been, we also have had some achievements. So for example, we've had £650,000 investment from the LTA to renovate our tennis courts. We've had £300,000 from the DFE for 22 schools in our borough to develop sporting activities in the schools. Yeah, we've had, what else can I talk about? We've had great successes with the London Youth Games. So when we started last year, we were at number 28 out of 33 boroughs. And we put some effort in that. We thought we couldn't remain at number 28 or anywhere below there if we want to be known as the borough of sport. And through hard work, we are now standing to be the most improved borough. And then also the last time I checked, we were at number 6, rather than, so from 28, we're now at number 6. Well, some of our young people have won gold medals and, you know, just across the board, they won several medals. The finals will be this weekend, and then we'll know exactly where we stand with that. But yeah, we're working with our park colleagues, because if we're going to deliver a borough of sport, we're going to rely on our beautiful parks. We want more people coming into the parks. And in order to do that, we need to be kept clean and safe. And we need to be able to use it in a way that it will benefit people and make them to actually come into the parks. And some of our activities will be, you know, delivered from the parks. One of the things that we're very keen on is to make sure that these activities, that there are activities within the communities. We want to take away that barrier from traveling, so or traveling far. So we want activities to be held in the different communities as much as possible, so that it can be closer to the people who will be using those facilities. And when we talk about under 16 getting free activities, now we have kids swimming for free in all of our leisure centers. So this summer they all can swim at least, you know, from now between 9 to 10 free of charge. And we have over 450 free classes in all of our libraries across the borough for older people. Actually, I say for older people, there are some younger people that attend as well. But we have up to 450 free classes in all of our libraries across the borough. So we have been working very hard, working with partners and, you know, trying to get physical activities and sporting activities within the borough. So yes, thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Caroline, and for all your hard work for doing this, and all the officers that have been supporting the way. Thank you. Are there any questions for Caroline? I'll take a few at a time. So I can see James, Martin, and I'll go Dan. Oh, sorry, James first.
Yeah, Caroline, thanks for this comprehensive report on the borough of sport, which I believe could be a real game changer for the well-being of residents, But I'd just like to ask, could you flesh out a bit, how is this borough sport, how is the report going to benefit the less affluent parts of the borough?
Well, as I said earlier, the report lays out what our plans are. And so in the less affluent part of the borough, once we have the fund, we'll be hoping that people in those areas will apply for funding, and they'll be able to roll out some activities within those areas. And the fact that we have our leisure centers across the borough as well, we have one in each part, Mitchell, Morden, and Wimbledon, so that, you know, whatever activity is there for everybody. But yes, we're hoping that they'll be able to apply for funding to be able to roll out activities in the area. We'll be able to also hear from them. We are very keen and to hear from them and find out what it is that they want to do. So that will be part of the work that we'll be carrying out.
Thank you, Caroline. Martin.
If I just take this opportunity of thanking Caroline for the report. I mean, this is obviously a very, very exciting agenda and something that could be an exemplar in terms of London. And the question I ask is obviously in terms of facilities in the borough. Obviously, the better the facilities, the more attractive they are for people to use. Is there any plans to bring forward projects within Merton which will enhance the sporting offer even further? Something like a running track in the east of the borough?
Yes, we have running track in Meacham already at the Cannons, and we will be we exploring ideas of having one in Morden as well. I think to become the borough of sport, we want to be able to serve everybody across the board, and so we have a running track in Wimbledon, we have one in Meacham. So I think it will be fair and good to have one in Morden, but we're looking at that at the moment. So in terms of running track, yeah, we'll be looking at that.
Thank you for the report. My main interest was about what's the yardstick for success. I mean, how do you define what a borough sport looks like? How do you measure it against other boroughs? And sort of how many people are you expecting to reach through this program over the next few years to get into doing sport?
Well, we want everyone to be involved, and that's why we're doing it as the way we're doing it. But of course, it needs to be measured, and with the system that we use, it will be able to tell us who's doing what and where. So one of the measurements would be that we want to make sure that it's across the borough. We don't just want one section. We don't just want one age group. We want people across the borough, and the system will be able to tell us that. And so, and I think London Sport, one of the organizations, already collect those kind of figures. So we have something to benchmark against. So yeah, so we'll be able to do that.
Thank you. Any further questions for Anthony? I know you have a few questions. I might just go to you and see if you that's you.
Exactly, is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Firstly, thank you for the report as well. I know the reference to facilities, and I wonder if the administration has plans for a facility strategy. That seems to me to be the next missing part of this. You can't randomly put facilities around the borough. There has to be strategy, there has to be feasibility study. So before we commit to running tracks in various places, I presume we look at the feasibility of those, in fact, engage with some of the sporting bodies to determine what is appropriate. So one of my questions is that the next step? Secondly, looking at 4.1, which is a reference to consultation with a lot of groups, I don't recall that being a public consultation as such, so I wondered if we might commit to publishing the results of that consultation. I've got a couple more questions, but maybe it makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Keep going.
Well, when it comes to facilities, we have been talking to our partners in Merton. We are, as I said earlier, we have a very rich sporting heritage. So we already have things in place, facilities in place, organizations in place. A lot of good work has been going on for years. So this is not anything new. It's just that the borough is supposed to sort of bring everything together and make sure that everyone across the board taking part in this. And that's what we do. So we need to make full use of what we have and then see where there are gaps and see how we can close that gap. So yes, we will be looking at facilities, but like what you said, I don't know whether Darren, if you want to add something to facilities consultation when it comes to building new facilities, especially when it comes to one park. So maybe Darren will be able to tell you.
Sure, thank you. Yes. Yeah, so in answer to your question, Catherine, yes, we will do a facility strategy for the borough, including that language as well, which will give us a good indication of what we need before we talk about investing in. And that will be in consultation with the governing body.
And would it be possible to publish the consultation before we do that?
Yeah, I'll take as much as we have to do the publication.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Thank you. So, thank you for your forbearance. Only two short ones, as it were. I'm interested into how it was decided to look at the two particular age groups. I mean, they seem fairly sensible. I'd like to understand how those age groups were chosen. And then specifically, I'd like to tie that into the Growth Sport Activity web platform and whether we're convinced that's the right approach given the age groups that we're choosing. It may very well be. I'd be interested in more information about that. And secondly, the community activators at Barrow 2.3. Why is it that they will be based within a community organisation host? Why was that decision made? And has that host been chosen?
Right. Okay. So in terms of the age groups, we know that as we all get older, we get slower and so less active. and so we've chosen that age group purposely because we want them to become more active. We want to get them involved. If you have you look at your neighbors, your residents, you find that you have some people who are older, but they're quite active, they're doing a lot, and you have some who are not, and you can clearly see the difference. They will struggle. So we want to make sure that we are encouraging them. It's not forceful, but we want to make it fun. Actually, this whole thing, in the end, we want to be sure that it is fun for everybody to take part in. And we want them to be encouraged and persuaded that it will work for them to have something to do and keep active and keep healthy. And then for the younger people, we think that if we can catch them a bit earlier, then as they get older, they won't be in the situation that their grandparents are in now. So that whilst they're growing up, they will have chosen something, they will have found something that they like doing to keep active, maybe some sporting activity or just, some other physical activity that they would like to do that would be that would keep them active. And we know that keeping active has many benefits. So we want people to be able to enjoy all of those benefits. And let's not forget, we're not just looking at those two people. I must stress the point that we are also keen for the people in between those two age groups to also be active. But we feel that they are younger, there's more chance for them to be going out to work and they might be more active and they can probably afford to pay. And so that's why we're focusing on those two groups, but we will also be making sure and doing the best we can do to get everybody involved.
I'm just trying to figure out whether it's based on any particular local factors or whether it's national evidence that you're looking at. From what you said, I suspect it's sort of more national rather than local.
Well, I think, nationally people, as we get older, it's known that as we get older, we get slower and, and also the young people, we think if you catch them earlier, chances are they will have some interest and will be able to take that through life. And in terms of the activators, the two activators, we want those people, we'll be hoping to get one for the under 16 and one for the over 65. And the reason we want them in the community is because we want them to be out there talking to people. We don't want for them to be like council officers. We want them to be out there in the community, talking to people, and people are free and happy and easily speak to them or access them. And they can also do things with people in the community. They will be on the ground, know what's happening, and people can contact them much more easily. And that's why we want that. We haven't chosen anyone yet. And if you were to ask me on the top of my head, I would think, for example, when it comes to older people, we all run to HUK, but I'm not saying it's them, but I think, that would be the natural thing place to go.
So
But
it won't just be sports.
absolutely not. Absolutely not. Not only sport. It will be sport. And whenever we say sport, we mean sport and physical activities. So it's all sporting and physical activities.
Right. Thank you very much, Caroline. We'll come back to you, Anthony.
So it's
We'll come back. Any other questions?
Well,
Nick,
yeah,
Dan, and Caroline. Or Nick.
yeah, I'll go. Okay. Really just wanted I agree with Councillor Walton, actually. We get this right. This is a great strategy. And so we really got to focus and get it right. I'd like to hear more about partnering, the partnerships created, and make sure that we're really laser-like focused on getting ourselves to the front of the queue on other grant funding. You mentioned the LTA, etc. But there are lots and lots of pots of money out there. And, historically, we've not been great as a council in getting our hands on some of this external funding.
Yeah.
So we really need a focus on that. And on the grant fund we mentioned in this document also, the community fund's a great idea, but I'm always very keen on making sure we get the best outcomes. How the outcomes are going to be measured? Is that money, that this taxpayer money being pumped in, are we getting the best outcomes? And is it a long-term strategy beyond avoiding the short terms?
That's good. Dan.
I wanted to ask about the Get Active portal, and is that being designed and set up in-house by council officers, or are we getting external support with that?
Going to go back to Caroline as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to say the Beat the Street was a really good initiative, and 3 of our special schools actually participated in it and enjoyed it. The children enjoyed it very much. So I was just going to ask about children with disabilities and neurodiversity, if there was any initiatives within the borough sport plan to encourage them to become more active and do more sport.
That's a brilliant question. If you don't mind, I'll start from that. Well, the strategy is just off the ground, but we really want to reach out to people with disability, whether they're adults or kids, and get them involved. We want everybody, absolutely everyone, to be involved. So that is a group of people that we will be reaching out to. So yes. And then in terms of whether this Get Active portal will be built in-house, we're doing it through Learners Sport. So they will be helping us with that. And then you talked about
External funding, just make sure we've
funding.
got a laser-like focus on
Yes.
getting our hands on pots of money.
Yes. And you can see when I mentioned earlier, we had £300,000 for up to 22 schools. That is a brilliant achievement, because those schools across the borough, we want to, and that there where, in fact, we probably could have an input in helping them design what sort of sporting activity, and probably work with them and see whether, I'm not saying that's what will happen, but that's my thinking now, that they could probably design something for people with disability, with kids with disability. But yeah, that funding is there, and there's a chance for them to even get more. So this is the initial amount. So it will follow on by, I think, up to £10,000 each. So it is quite a substantial amount of money that they've had. And you're quite right. We can't do this on our own. We don't have this money, but we will be working with partners. We will be making lots and lots of applications, and we will be working with sporting partners within our borough and outside of our borough.
Right. Thank you, Caroline. Any other questions for Caroline? Anthony, you have one. Victoria, you have one. Any final questions? If not, over to you, Anthony. I'm sorry, I didn't see the end there. Okay, right. You have the final word. So Anthony, maybe you would go first.
Fine. Yeah, I wanted to come back then, if I could, to the Get Active, which is clearly one of the main work strands. And I just wondered, obviously you've started work on this. We have evidence that this is the right approach, particularly for those age groups that you want to capture, given that this is a key part of the strategy. and also a key part of the measurement. We have evidence that shows that this web portal is the way to go.
Well, before maybe let's go to Victoria to have the question as well.
Just on the advisory operational groups, wonder how the makeup of that will be decided. Will it, depending on the scrutiny, will they be bring recommendations to this committee?
And then one for young inspector.
I was going to say, I don't know if I missed something, but how exactly are you going to be reaching out to the young people?
How what?
How are they going to be reaching out to the young people?
Okay.
Yeah.
So reaching out to young people, we're going to have this activator who will be a young person. But first of all, we will have a website. We're spending heavily on advertising and making sure that people are aware. Young people easily go online and see things, but we're not just relying on that. We will have this activator, which is a young person, and their duty would be to reach out to young people. And so that's the response to that question. And then you asked that
I
question.
was just going to add, you said advertising, is it advertising on the website or social media platform?
Social media platform, and yeah, we want to be, this is big, we want to be very visible, and younger people sort of connect with social media a lot, but we're not only just relying on that, and that's why we also have an activator for a younger person, for the younger people.
So we'll be having a alert on TikTok soon.
if that's what they want. And then you talked about Anthony, you've mentioned
The portal.
the portal.
And the evidence base for why this is a key part of the strategy, and we have evidence that shows that's the right way to reach the age group that we want to reach.
I'm not sure whether we Dan, are you aware of any background evidence? But we looked into this and we felt that was the way to go. And also, one of the attractiveness about this portal is that it's very sophisticated. It filters. So we want to be able to offer free classes. So, for example, people who would be entitled to free classes will be able to filter the classes that will be there, and they will be able to, if you filter in the right way, you'll find the free classes coming on the top, and you have access to that. If you want to filter it in by location, so where you are, you can see all the classes in your area. So it's quite sophisticated, and we think it will actually do the job. And so that's the attraction for that. It will also be able to give us the data that we want. So when we talked earlier about how will we be able to measure our success, it will be able to give us the data that we need that we can use to measure our success.
And then Victoria's question as well, and just for the advisory panel, how that would work.
Can I pass that on to you, Dan, for the advisory panel?
So I think we need to think ahead about who's going to be the group, because we've got the open forum, which says many people involved in discussion as possible. And then we need to think carefully, it's not been set up yet, so we need to think carefully about we get the right mix of local residents, representatives in the community, sports clubs, people like health services as well, but also from regional and national groups as well, who can help us with that external funding offer that's out there. So we think we need some sort of specialists on a smaller scale rather than any such before, but the membership hasn't been good yet. So it's open for discussion, obviously, on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Was there no further questions? Just have to say thank you very much, Caroline, for all your work on this. It sounds really promising, I think, as others believe are. Anthony,
Recommendation.
would over to you.
Okay. I mean, thank you very much for this and the work that's gone into it. And I just wondered if it would be, if the panel might support an additional recommendation that in supporting and developing this strategy, we feel it's key that there is a facility strategy, and we look at, basically we look at feasibility before we make decisions about investment in facilities. So my suggestion is that we have a recommendation that development of a facility strategy and feasibility.
I think on that, I'd like to hear Caroline down on what you think on that proposal.
I think, as I said in my answer, we are commissioning a piece of work on that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
see any reason why that can't be recommended. We're doing it.
We've
So.
already done that.
Well, I mean, if we're doing it, is the recommendation needed? If, if the work, just the work, maybe, I don't know if you said, you just mentioned before, but just what the piece of work does and how that speaks to these recommendations, how that would.
Maybe a way forward in such a recommendation, but if it needs to be agreed on the panel, but we note in the minutes that the panel supports that idea, and then we don't need a recommendation.
I don't know, it's any reasons.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So with that, Steph, thank you very much, Caroline. Thanks really much for coming and for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Caroline. So now, as I tried to do earlier, without realising the order we changed things up in, I will move on to the community toilet scheme. And I'll pass over to Stephen in just a second, but I think the first thing to say is just, what a fantastic piece of work, and just, to really kind of applaud what you've done, Stephen, what I think Peter, who's also played a role in this as well. I mean, it really is, I think everyone who's read it and had a chance to go through it has comes to the same opinion that it is, a really impressive piece of work with a lot of time and effort and thought went into it. So just to say thank you very much for that. But now, I'm going to pass over to you briefly just to say a few words on the report and the work you've been doing over the last few months with this.
Great, thank you. I do feel I'm speaking to quite a rarefied audience of cabinet members and new officers I'm familiar with. Thank you for the opportunity. To those who've not read all of it or not fully up to speed, the panel kindly authorised and encouraged me to make the inquiry 6 months or so ago. I did come back and hopefully bring you up to speed about it some 3 months or so ago, so that you knew more or less what was happening. Over the last 6 months or so, I've become, quite passionate, much more expert on toilets in public than I was. So I'll just say a few words in support of what I've done in the report. Perhaps then John from Age UK can say a few words if you're still ready to say something. Julie's going to speak. Okay, great. And then perhaps if there's any questions after that, if that's okay. Yes, as I say, over the last 6 months, wherever I've been going, I've been wondering what the toilets are like wherever I go. And I realise not everyone's as blinkered as I am, but I don't suppose that anyone here thinks that we have great public toilets in Melbourne. Can we be proud of how we accommodate this most basic of needs? If you are happy, you're in a minority. In our borough-wide survey, 93% of residents said that our provision was either poor or very poor. Of course, this affects all of us, but in particular affects the aged, and we are an aging borough, the infirm, small children, people trying to use public transport, people trying to actively travel. Do we care generally, and do we care about these people who are struggling? And how much do we care? Earlier today, Rosie kindly sent round something you may have seen before or not, which I didn't see till last week, and which we're adding as an appendix. It was prepared by people locally and highlights the challenges in Mitcham. Their problems are not unique, but perhaps are the most extreme of the different town centres in the borough. And as I hadn't seen it, I said I'd make a point of mentioning it in this meeting. So, during the preparation of the report, I was encouraged by kind words from members of this panel, by comments from other councillors and officers and members of the public. And obviously everybody likes the idea of decent toilet provision and realises that we have plenty of scope for improvement, but it all comes at a price. So how much does it cost to actually build a toilet fit for public use? You'd see in my report figures like £50,000, £90,000. How about maintaining just a pair of toilets throughout a year? My estimate is £5,000 just for 2 toilets next to each other per year. So do we as a council want to pay what it takes to have a proper level of loos around the borough? Some residents might think that the answer is not really if we don't have to. Part of our answer has been to refer to a community toilet scheme in which private enterprise cooperates with the council to make their toilets available to the public. Don't we have one of those? Not really. We have 5 members supposedly. None of them display signs to show that they are CTS members, and 2 have signs on the door saying customer use only. The existing scheme has clearly failed. Richmond and Lewisham, similar sorts of size boroughs to ourselves. In both of them, they've looked to offer something in the region of 70 different toilet facilities across their boroughs. Did they look to pay for those themselves? Well, given the numbers, no, not surprisingly, but they invested in effective community schemes. How did they do that? Well, first they made council-owned toilets available. Surely as a guiding principle, all council buildings that serve the public should make their toilets available. They are owned by us after all. And then they arranged for those from other public organisations, such as the NHS, to be made available to the public. And they arranged clear signage so people knew where they were. And then they cooperated with private enterprise who willingly agreed for their toilets to be made available. Why on earth would they do such a thing? Well, firstly, they were given a little money, though only a tiny fraction of the actual cost. Secondly, they were held up as local champions, helping their community in cooperation with the council. And thirdly, they realised that 87% of people, per our survey, are more likely to go to places where there are reasonable toilets. And once they're there, if their needs are catered for, they're obviously able to stay longer. Ely's and Centre Court are proud of their toilet provision, and Wimbledon residents rely on it. So what do we need to do to have 70 toilets available in Merton instead of less than 5? How much do we care? We need commitment from the council that it's a fundamental priority to ensure toilets are available for those who need them. I spoke to Councillor Alan Britis. I'm pleased to see you here this evening, Councillor. And he suggested from his previous efforts, we should toilet-proof the council's policies. It is a matter of public health, but it affects all the departments of the council and should be recognised as such. A well-functioning community toilet scheme with readily available toilets will be a matter of pride for residents in Merton, perhaps a matter of civic pride. It really needs an officer to embed provision in the council to drive the relaunch of the scheme, ensure there's sufficient provision across the borough and that there continues to be. And once we have the provision arranged, to make sure that everyone knows where to turn when they are in need. And it needs some money. How much? Well, if I said, how about a penny per head of Merton residents per day per year, £3.65, no, that would be too much, surely. Perhaps £1 per head of the Merton residents per year. Would that be reasonable to tackle it? Not a lot in the scheme of things. Or would 50p per person in Merton per year be reasonable? Or would 5p per head be reasonable? That's the amount that the Deputy Leader indicated has been penciled in for the next 3 years. My hope is that the pencil is faint and the dark pen of common sense enables a relaunch scheme to be adequately funded. I've not specified any figures in the report, but I hope you will support my recommendation for a properly funded relaunched community toilet scheme. And please, if you will excuse me just 30 seconds more, I'll just mention one more issue which I referred to in the report, which is the lack of provision at Morley Station. The current situation is shameful and we should feel embarrassed. It's been dire for years, but since the night tube, are we surprised that desperate travellers from central London offered no alternative, relieved themselves in shop doorways and in the adjacent alleys? Of course, TfL bear a huge part of the responsibility, but perhaps there are ways we can help or encourage something to be done. We really have to do something. Perhaps hand over to Age UK to contribute.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Just to say, I'm Julie Johns and I represent a group called More News for Merton. We're not actually Age UK Merton. We're supported by John here from Age UK London, but we are actually independent of Age UK Merton. We established our group last autumn because of the dire state of toilets in the borough and decided this had gone on long enough. So there's a group of us who got together and decided we needed to campaign on this issue, which is how I ended up in contact with Stephen and Peter. However, the other thing we have done as a group is actually go around and visit a lot of the toilets in the borough. So if you see Appendix 1 in the report, many of those toilets are ones that I visited. So I have a real idea of generally what toilets are like in the borough, where they are. I haven't been to Mitcham, I confess, and there are a few other areas I've overlooked. But in terms of Wimbledon, Morden, Rains Park, I probably could find every toilet for you. So, as I say, we were motivated by our own experience as residents in the borough and what difficulty it was for us when we were out and about. But obviously, as a borough, we're also visited by lots of people. We have huge events like Wimbledon. We have music events in the park. More and more, we're trying to invite people into the borough. And it's an embarrassment if people come here and they're struggling to find toilets, they're unfamiliar with the area. And places like Love Wimbledon, the website, no mention of toilets on there. So we've established our group. We've spoken to Eleanor before about our aims and also reported to her on what we found. I'm very encouraged by what Stephen said and put in this report, and we would wholeheartedly endorse everything in that. There's probably some things where we would like to go a bit further, but we really appreciate what's been done to highlight this issue and to actually come up with something constructive to improve the situation here. So as I say, we agree broadly with the report, particularly think that council premises have to be the beacon here. If the council premises aren't in the scheme, why is everybody else going to join? We've also identified that the NHS could be another good supporter. When I was out and about, people in Dundonald Park are saying to me, oh, nearest toilet, Nelson Health Centre. They're using them anyway, whether they should or they shouldn't. Rains Park has a health centre. So people are adopting these toilets. What we need to do is persuade the people who own those toilets to be more willing to share them. I agree that we want to bring on board the voluntary groups, although I think they obviously have monetary issues about caring for premises and the like, and getting the voluntary sector involved. I was also really pleased to see in the report that you're suggesting better work with the GLA on making a statutory responsibility. And obviously we're totally in support the idea of Morden Tube having a toilet. That is just a diabolical situation there. It's a huge interchange for public transport, let alone people coming back at all hours of the day. As you know, I mean, toilets are an essential facility for everyone. Stephen's just said that. This is not just about older people. It's about girls having periods. It's about people who are pregnant. It's about people with health problems. It's about commuters. It's for everyone. Everybody needs toilets at some point. Those who manage to go through life without needing a public convenience, I envy them. But there are other knock-ons from that. We know that people, if they can't get access to toilets, think twice about going out and leaving the house. And so there are people who are staying home and not participating in social activities or going to things that the borough is promoting, would like them to enjoy, simply because they're worried about, will they find a toilet on the way there or on the way back? There may be something at their destination, but if you're a public transport user, as a lot of my group is, that's a real worry if you're stuck somewhere between Wimbledon and Morden and there are no buses to be found. It also has a detrimental impact on people's physical health because basically people who do go out, what they do is not drink. So in weather like this, people are walking around dehydrated, which is causing health problems. So there's a knock-on cost that we don't always see here, where people are, not treating their bodies well we've been talking about sport and health, simply because they're afraid of, are they going to find a toilet? I'm afraid I'm not a person who's going to go down an alley in Morden, whatever time of day it is. The other thing I would ask you to think about in this context with this report is the geographical issue across the wider borough, because we're talking very much within this report about town centres, and we know some town centres, particularly Wimbledon, are, compared to some others, better provided for. But if we're talking about people participating in other activities in the borough, you do need to look at the wider geographical area and patterns of travel on where people are going. If you're stuck in the middle of, I don't know, even in Rains Park, let's say, you're not in Wimbledon, you're not in Morden. Where are your facilities? And when people are travelling around, if I was to walk from where I live near Cannon Hill to, say, Wimbledon Common, I won't pass a toilet. I'd have to go to somewhere like Canizaro or Wimbledon Village, which I have to say is not particularly toilet friendly, to find a toilet if I decided to go out for a long walk. So I would just ask you to think about that aspect of it, particularly for the communities you represent here, and about what it's like in real life for them on a daily basis when they're out and about. We've just been hearing about Merton being a borough of sport, and we're saying we want people to go into our parks, we want them to go to green spaces, we want them to walk, we want them to exercise, we want them to run. But where are the toilets for these people? I mean, I've heard people saying they've been obstructed going into the toilets in Morden Park, for example. I wasn't on the occasion I went, but I've heard people say, they're made to feel awkward trying to use those toilets. And if you were to go to that side of Borough, Morden Park, Cannon Hill, you'd be struggling to find a toilet. So I think what we would say is we're really pleased with the proposals in these recommendations, and we really strongly ask you to support them. However, as a group, we'd also say it would be really nice if the council could be a bit more ambitious with some of this and actually look more to engaging with businesses, because while I've been out and about, it's quite clear to me that there are businesses who join this scheme, and in some cases need to be paid to do so. And it's quite noticeable that there are quite a lot of differences between different parts of the borough. And I think that is the issue. It's understanding the different areas within the borough, what the barriers are there, and how you persuade people to come on board with this. So to give you an example. Yes, that's right, I'm leave it there. So I've just said, people at Wimbledon Chase, which doesn't feature on the list, very supported there. Everyone I asked if I could use their toilet said yes, without hesitation. But Camden Centre, you struggle. Wimbledon Village has lots of toilets, but you're not made to feel welcome there. It's like you should be a customer. So I think it's about changing that mindset and encouraging businesses to engage and see the benefits of participating. And Tower Hamlets is a good example of where they've done something like that. And to tie up, I'm on the final page. We're obviously happy to support the council by continuing to keep an eye on toilets and feedback on what we find. But we really like to get the community forums on board with this, and people like the Youth Parliament, we think, could be really useful in terms of seeing how the scheme goes if it's implemented. So I just want to say thank you for allowing us to come along this evening and quickly go through what we found. But we really welcome what's being proposed and look forward to seeing signs and information so people can find some toilets in the future.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate you coming. So I think before I ask questions, I might pass over to Ellie, if you'd like to add.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll say something and then we'll be happy to take some questions. Yeah, so I'm here because, as people have said, actually dealing with public toilets is an issue that covers lots of different areas. It is public health, it is facilities, it is parks. But we also think it is a matter of civic pride. So I have ended up with political responsibility for toilets. Who says that dreams don't come true? This is it. So I'd like to echo the thanks to Stephen and Peter for their work on an incredibly thorough piece of work, and you've clearly thought of this from lots of different angles and done a really, really important piece of research here. And similarly, I very much enjoyed meeting Julie and colleagues and hearing about the mystery shopping and who was mean and who wasn't, and he let you through And so I'd like to thank you as a kind of scrutiny group for doing this task group and for, you know, pushing this up our agenda. So we know it's important, we know it's something that people worry about, but this work that you've done has shown that this is you know, something we do really need to look at soon. And we agree it's a matter of equality too. There are, and we also agree that, yeah, the current scheme, I don't think we'd use the word failed. It's essentially kind of expired. It was working, COVID happened. Some of the businesses who were participating didn't make it through COVID bluntly, and we haven't kind of restarted it since. So we agree that something like community toilet scheme would need a kind of restart and refresh. We also very much agree that the first principle should be that public toilets and public buildings should be accessible, well signed, and part of some such scheme. And I also agree with the principle of working with NHS providers and other community providers, community centres and so on, to ensure that those are available too. And I think the key thing here, I think what we need to do is go away and come up with a plan. I've got Paul McGarry here with me, who will be the officer responsible for toilets. Again, did you want that on your CV? Exactly.
I can pass it over to you.
We need to go away and come up with a plan, take on board all of your thoughts and your suggestions, and work out what we think is feasible. But I think what is clear is a lot of it comes down to communications, because sometimes these ones are essentially already freely available, so people don't know they're there. There's a lack of clarity about whether they are or not. And yeah, that would be, I think, the first point of call.
Brilliant. And we
again, just to thank the group for all the work that went into it. I mean, I'm involved in terms of reaching out to the businesses because that's how the original community toilet scheme worked. But there's definitely a team about the council buildings. The rest of it will into this. We look to see how we build up that community toilet programme and a greater visibility of it. This last time there was no signs in the street, no maps. There's a lot of toilets in there, but people don't know they can use them. So we
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, I open up any questions earlier on saying Caroline, James, and John. So maybe take them all at once. So Caroline first.
Yes, thank you for that piece of work. It's really good. I was just wanting to ask about changing places, toilets, if that comes into this as well.
And James?
Yeah, I'd like to ask Stephen, the findings 1.1. You know, as we love to count and catalogue things in this country, everything. So is there going to be another count of the number of toilets in London and Dubai? Just interested.
John?
I'd like to thank Stephen for the report and Peter for all his hard work as well. And also say that I've had quite a bit of communication on lack of toilets. And it's both from older people who are struggling to get out because there is no toilet provision, younger people or grandparents taking younger kids to parks, and there's no toilets in parks that are open during the times that people use them. I asked the question about Hayden's Road Rack and the park, the toilet there that's permanently locked apart from when there's sporting activities taking place. And that should be easily available. I was asked the question as to it costs too much to maintain, not going to do it. So I'd just like to ask why.
Well, maybe Eddie would maybe
that.
take John and Caroline's question, and then I can pass it to Stephen to answer James.
Yeah, if that's okay. So yes, so toilets and parks is a whole different department, and essentially, yeah, I mean, as Stephen put in his report, the kind of cost of running and maintaining those is very, very high. And that's why not just in Merton, but in many boroughs, you won't find kind of freely available public toilets nowadays. So Hayden's Road is a good example of one where when you hire that pitch, you're a cricket team and you do have access to it, but no, it isn't really available. I mean, we'd love to have that £100,000 or millions of people would be to have toilets across all of our parks open, but that is sadly not the financial situation that we are in. On the changing places toilets, yes, that is mentioned in the report, and we agree that, so for those that know, these are kind of fully accessible toilets that have close that people with quite severe disabilities can be used. They have to be quite large because often somebody else needs to go in with the person. We think the best opportunity for putting those in is when something's already being refurbished, because they do need to be quite large, they're quite expensive. So a good example is when we refurbished Northern Leisure Centre. More recently, Centre Court Shopping Centre is being refurbished at the moment. So back last year, I asked the owners about Romulus if they were considering putting in place, changing place the toilet. They said, okay, let's look into it. So I put them in touch with our facilities team who had some experience of that. And they've since confirmed to me a couple of weeks ago that they are having a new change of place facilities toilet in that place. So I think that's going to be a key aspect there, is us keeping an eye on planning and when kind of new buildings are coming through, making sure that we are putting in for new change of places facilities.
And maybe I just want to add anything more. I might ask Stephen, can we take James' question? If you know the answer to that.
On the changing places, obviously, I had an opportunity to talk to Ellie a little while ago before finalising the report with yourselves, for yourselves, and it is good that there's progress in Centre Court, but we are substantially below average in Merton in terms of our provision across the country, compared with the country as a whole. So I think it would be good if we can find another 1 or 2 places, but I absolutely agree with Ellie that the most cost-effective way to do it is when you're already refurbishing stuff or when you're building it. That's obviously the case, but you have to be on the lookout for the opportunities, and so that's why I mentioned it in the lack of provision for people in public spaces was something I specifically asked about following the short update I gave you a few months ago, so I did address it with the open spaces folks, and they said, well, yeah, it's going to cost. And I think it was sort of fairly flippant remark, but you know, on the back of not a fag packet these days, envelope, it was £40,000 just to be able to open and close the things at the end of the day, even for restricted toilets where you were using radar keys to get in and out, not just general public availability. So it's a chunk of money. My sort of way around that, if we can get there, is consider if there are facilities such as pubs or restaurants near open spaces, so that at least if we're supporting them as part of a community toilet scheme, there's some sort of toilet near the open space. And then that gives you a bit of a chance that there's somewhere you can go with your grandchildren or whatever it may be. Counter toilets, James, perhaps I misunderstood. There was a count across the whole of London there, wasn't there? I think it would make sense, certainly Sarah, that we were talking to, one of the officers here, was talking about what we would do as a starting point if we are taking this forward. It might be that using some of the Age UK information we have already, we do another sort of examination of what there is in Merton, so that Paul can work out where he's going to be knocking on the door and not, and also making sure that we know where there's facilities open that can be used. So I think there will be, as an essential of taking this forward, more information on what we've got in Merton, and I think that's a good starting point.
Thank you, Stephen. Any further questions? I know, Mike, you had one, Victoria.
Right, thank you, Chair. Well, I'm just wondering, you mentioned itinerant workers. I don't know what the police would consider them to be themselves to be itinerant, but I wonder what levers, leverage we can use from Veolia, from the police force, from the ambulance service, because are there already informal arrangements? You refer to informal arrangements on regular routes, but is there something they know, or we can add in perhaps negotiating a broader community toilet scheme, because they may have ones that we don't know that they're using, and broaden those out. But I also want us to not lose sight of the fact that we used to have many toilets in Merton going back a few years, and I, as a former chair of environment, I used to be the toilets councillor, so I had that matter. But many of them were underground, Victorian. There was one on Mitcham by the cricket green. There was one outside the town hall in Wimbledon, at Centre Court now, and there were others around the borough. So they were very inaccessible, and that was one reason for them closing. But another reason for closing was safety, and we mustn't lose sight of the safety aspect of people going in and out of toilets all over the place. I'm not arguing against the provision of more toilets, but there is a safety component that we can't lose sight of, and they may not be staffed, and there may be children going there, older vulnerable people going in there, and we just we have to think about that. I'm not suggesting cameras or anything like that, but how do we monitor that? And that needs to take into account.
Sorry.
About council facilities, so in Rains Park, the libraries closed on Wednesday, no PIN access, so I just wondered your thoughts around that. And then also the Mission Society's response that was around today. It talks about the fact that there was a consultation back 10 years ago where the toilet was recommended it comes up, but then scrapped. So the Mission Society is very much supporting public toilets opposed to the scheme. I just wondered, is this scope to the budget toilet in that area?
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to come back to toilets in open spaces, more with the example of Dundon Rec, where Friends Group, which I'm the Vice Chair, would like to work with ID Verdi to see if we could open it a bit more, because currently it's only with certain football matches and cricket matches on. ID Verdi's main concern is the costs and difficulty of cleaning and or people getting into them when they should be sleeping in their things. So they were concerns that ID Verdi had. It's not a bit silent truthfully. I know that the charge events we would like. Another issue I'd like to bring into the mix, which is probably one for the community toilet scheme, is delivery riders, mass numbers of delivery riders in our town centres for good reason. Obviously, they don't have places to go. Part of the difficulty that they have is that they are literally on the street on the night, hanging around outside, letting down. So that should be.
Yeah, well, a few questions. I'm going to Ellie first.
We can move on. So on that last point, yes. So one of the recommendations from Stephen's report is about exploring if there are ways of encouraging premises who are using delivery drivers to make sure they do have toilets. So I think that's one of the conditions.
I think technically the customers anyway, because they are in and out. It depends whether the toilets we can have any extension.
But coming on to that more broadly, I think looking at workers and itinerant workers, and we also have ambitions for a nighttime economy, and the toilets become very important there as well. So I think it's so I don't have an answer there, but it's about taking that away and seeing this as, but it links to Victoria, all the points about different hours and different times. We need to be clear in any communications about when toilets are available, so that something doesn't get caught short. The safety point is also a cross-cutting issue from what many of you have said. Is yes, it would be lovely, in an ideal world to have volunteers open toilets, but then you would need some assurances that they are kept safe and you don't get people sleeping in them. So I'm happy to kind of take that away with them, look at the parts group to see if there are any opportunities there where there are toilets. But I am also politically responsible for safety, and I wouldn't want to start to open up areas that could encourage antisocial behaviour, drug taking, or more nefarious. I'm going to leave Paul to talk about the public toilets in Mitcham and why that was cost.
Yeah. So when we started the Rediscover Mitcham project, again, we engaged the community public toilet provision, or lack of, came up a lot in Mitcham. We did plan to build that as part of the Rediscover Mitcham scheme, but the idea of a standalone one, it did come down to costs. A bit less about the cost to build it, more about the ongoing maintenance and management of it. And again, it was one of those out of a catalogue machine ones. And again, there's questions about people who review a couple of reviews. Those types of one versus ones in a premises a bit more looked after. We're doing community engagement again, I mentioned at the moment, because we're bringing in town centre management and market management. So the council will staff present, I mentioned, which we haven't had before. The same issues are coming up through that engagement at the moment, so how we will be reacting to that. But again, likely to be about how we reinvigorate and grow the community toilet scheme in Mitcham, so that they're in premises and they're in businesses where they are looked after and people feel a bit more comfortable in. But also wrapping in Mitcham Library and Vestry Hall and the Cannons, which, although not in the town centre, there are council buildings around the edge of Mitcham town centre, which are still in the site.
Stephen,
the only point I could throw in to Mike's query is that I think that's why it's essential that you have an officer driving it, and that the officer is taking into account issues of ongoing safety and maintenance and so on, and also that we have some standards which we suggested perhaps having someone such as the Age UK or the Morlus or Merton or whoever it may be feeding back on the actual cleanliness and safety and so on of the toilets that are being used. So we don't, it's not just a matter of, which I think has been the case in the past to a degree, give someone a bit of money and hope they'll take care of it. You do actually have to manage the facilities that you're providing under the community toilet scheme heading as well. So I think that's an important aspect of it. And if you don't think it's going to be safe and clean, then you don't take it on as part of the community toilet scheme.
Great, thank you, Stephen. Any other questions? Dan, any others? Not. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up a bit about the point about the toilet in Midtown Centre being closed, the Sipfork Road car park one. It was closed because it was not realistic, and it wasn't reopened because it wasn't realistic. I guess that was down to funding, right? And so now we have street. I'm just throwing an idea out there. We're now getting street sweeping being brought back in house. Like Merton employees will be the ones sweeping our streets. Is it so onerous to add upon the list of requirements, the list of duties to open and close public toilets? Could there be some kind of double jobbing there? And if that opportunity is possible, would that lower the cost and perhaps make it more feasible to open more public toilets?
Well, of course. So, I mean, it's feasible. It's whether we'd have to look at the routes they're doing at the moment, how long it takes to close toilets, etc. But it's certainly something to look at as part of the review of the service as it comes back in house.
Okay. We'll get those like figures to see how much additional.
Yeah, we can have a look at that.
Great. Oh, so there's no further questions, I think, of the recommendations of the report. And I mean, I think my feeling is that I mean, we can go through each one by one, but there might be a fair few to go through. And I think all in all that I think they're generally fantastic and solid recommendations that so I'd be happy to take them if everyone is as a whole. And so if everyone's happy to proceed and adopt and have a vote on them all together, then I'd say, yeah, all those in favour of the recommendations on the reports. Agreed. Let's go with that then.
Thank you.
And yeah, and just to say, yeah, we'll find a word. Just thank you very much, Stephen, for all the work done in pushing this forward. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Stuart. As I think I've said to you before, I'm more than happy for Pete to do all the hard work and for me to take the glory.
Well, sorry, of course. Of course. Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, well then moving.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you. Moving on then, it's a bit for later now, because I've already said quite a few things. I'll move on to the executive director introductions. And so yes, so obviously two new executive directors, each I'm sure can dig into their long job titles and all the things they cover. But maybe if I can just pass that over to Lucy first, maybe to just give a bit of yourself and some of your priorities that you've got coming up, both in the short and long term.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for inviting myself down here tonight. So I'm Lucy Owen, and I'm the Executive Director of Housing and Sustainable Development. I think it's about week 6 or 7, so I'm very, very pleased to be here. In terms of sort of just some of my priorities, I have a background in regeneration and housing. I'm pleased to hear. So hopefully up for the job. But some of the priorities obviously is to sort of deliver the new council plan, but some of the initial priorities are really to get underway with the 400 affordable homes, so the first homes that the council have built in a generation. So to get those underway and start building those. To also look at regeneration more widely, particularly the regeneration of Morton Town Centre and how we can get that kick-started. But then also other town centre investments and improvements such as Mitcham Town Centre and the other town centres linking into the Civic Pride Fund and other improvements there. But also importantly linked into that economic development. So it's not just about the building works and public realm. It's about how you link that into economic development, skills, jobs, and greater community wealth. And then sort of the final priority is looking at increasing the supply of affordable housing across the borough. Full stop. Obviously, there's a 400 we want to build, but across a borough full stop. So working with planning, development management, but also working with the housing need and homelessness team,
trying to look at increasing supply of decent private rented sector, because the increase in temporary accommodation, as I know you've all heard from much of the work that Elliot's been doing, is going up across London. It's not just an issue in Merton, but across London. So what can we do to make sure we've got a decent supply of good quality homes and for our residents?
Perfect, thank you. And maybe before taking questions, maybe pass it to Dan to introduce yourself, maybe take questions.
Sure, thanks, Chair. So my portfolio covers that's right now. So environment, civic pride and climate, that's my job title. So in terms of the remit that I cover, I pretty much cover all the main operational services that we deliver in Merton. So that's all the waste, street cleansing, highways, parking. I also look after environmental health training standards, so regulatory services partnership that we have. And I also look after leisure, sport, culture, arts, libraries and heritage as well. And in my title, I've got climate and civic pride. so although Lucy and I
I'll take some.
well, we can work on that. That's fine. So we had a cabinet away day today actually, and we split up into our executive director and portfolio pairings. Although I had 4, so I have 4 cabinet members that I support in terms of delivery of their portfolios. And I guess the key things for me at the moment, and we were talking about it today, are around the waste and streets agenda and green spaces. So we've got some big stuff we're doing around bringing street cleansing service back in house that was just talked about, commissioning a new waste collection, waste street cleansing, waste recycling contract by 2025 for both of those, March, April time in 2025, and then reviewing our green space management and grounds maintenance function, which I believe we talked about being a potential topic for this group in this calendar year. So there's some really big priorities for us in doing that. And I've also got the Borough of Sport, which we've discussed today, so I won't go into detail on that, but feel free to ask me questions on that one. And climate, as I mentioned, but that does cut across Lucy and I's area, and no one area, no one director can deliver on climate. There's a lot of stuff along those different portfolios I've already mentioned that deliver against the climate agenda, transport, energy reduction, retrofit, but also around behavioural change. And I think that's something I'd really like to push with colleagues in the borough about how we get out into the community and start talking with people about how we can help them, encourage them to change behaviour in terms of climate, tackling climate crisis. And then finally, the civic pride stuff. So, how do we create an environment in which people live that they can be proud of? And then that helps with the civic pride agenda in terms of engagement. Oh, I also have community safety, and emergency planning as well. So 2 key areas, so 2 key areas that we are looking about how we bolster some of that stuff. And there's a big sort of piece of work I need to do looking in terms of what the staffing structure is like. Lucia has a piece of work on that as well. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, I know we give a very warm welcome to both of you. It's great to have both of you on board. And that's open for any questions. I see Martin over there. Dan, any other questions? Over to you, Martin.
Just a question to Lucy. Obviously, there is concerns in the construction sector about inflation at the moment, and obviously the viability of schemes. Obviously, very welcome that Merton is building homes after 40 years on those sites. But how do you see that impacting in terms of development? I know there is concerns from across London about construction inflation, which is running way ahead of other inflation also as well, in terms of potential other developments in the borough and across London in whole, because the finances are challenging at the moment, especially at a time when you've got rising rates of interest as well.
Yeah, it is a very tricky market. So that's undeniable. I think there's a number of things we can do, because we have got the innovation to build, and affordable homes are desperately needed across London, in Merton, and across London, and the slowdown sort of doesn't help that. There's a number of things we can do. One is that there's a report that went to Cabinet in terms of the first tranche of affordable homes we're building. We're actually partnering with L&Q on that, who are one of the largest housing associations in London. So they have a lot of expertise in there, because it's something we're doing for the first time. So we're using their expertise, their frameworks, and their contractors to help us manage some of that risk as well. obviously going out to tender properly. So there'll be another point from that tender when we'll look at those costs. The other thing that is very important to do is maximise GLA grant, because these homes are going to be socially rented homes. The amount of grant available is very high. So we need to work with the GLA to maximise that as much as we can to make those affordable. The next thing that's worth saying as well is that we are looking at doing an asset review, which we're looking at the moment to say what are our assets that Merton has at the moment and how can we use those to be able to kind of cross-subsidise the homes that we want to build. So, and then we can build that into a pipeline, looking at those viability costs, etc. We're lucky that we do own some of the land, so we don't have the land costs, but looking at those viability costs and looking at the pipeline in terms of looking which are the easiest ones to do first, and then some of the trickier ones potentially a bit later, where hopefully some of the costs will come down. But it is a difficult time, and we'll have to take each one case by case, obviously, in terms of where the viability are, what the GLA grant is looking like along those lines. But you know, having said that, they're slowing down, people are still building. So it's really important to get those homes.
Thank you, Steve. Dan?
Hi, Lucy. I have a question for you as well. Obviously, one of the largest housing associations in Merton is Clarion, and I'm sure you might be familiar with the difficulties residents face in ensuring not even a decent, a basic minimum standard from them. How will you be measuring progress with Clarion? How often will you be checking in with them? And what are you expecting, and how will this be measured?
So I've already obviously met with Clarion and their directors there, and there has been, and I think they acknowledge the issues that there have been, and sort of working together on them. I think we've sort of agreed in principle, and a lot of this comes down to the relationship with Councillor Judge and the Dean as well, and the leader and others. So we've agreed on complete transparency and no surprises approach. That they will keep us updated very regularly on how they're doing on their repairs across the borough, where there are issues, what they're doing, so we get a regular monitoring report so we can hold them to account on that. We're also going to suggest having at least a six monthly very high level meeting with Councillor Judge and the leader, myself and the directors Clarion, so we can go into really strategic issues and do that. But we've got the day-to-day operational contacts that myself and officers are in contact with, and pick up the phone whenever we need to. So we've got that sort of communication to understand what's happening and what's going on, and really keep holding them to account in terms of, I'm sure there'll be casework coming through from all councils as well to understand what that is. But it's I think the relationship is improving, and I think that part of that is the honesty. And being, as you know, I know they are looking to be a lot more reactive in terms of the issues and complaints and moving forward on things. So.
In terms of the data that you're getting, in terms of areas where like repairs are not being completed in a certain period of time, can you share that with local ward councillors?
Can I come back to you on that? Because that's something that I'll you know, I do individual cases, but I don't want to promise something if it's confidential information that Karen giving. Hopefully yes, but let me have that conversation. Yeah.
Cool. Any further questions? Nick,
Quick
Steve,
question on the current regeneration program. You mentioned additions with regards to materials, etc. How is the regeneration progressing, and what stage are we at with clawback?
On the Clarion, the Clarion. You want to give an update on that?
Yeah,
Or is that commercially?
As long as we don't mention the numbers. Yeah,
I know
so
where we are on the overall, but
so every development scheme has viability challenges. But what Clarion are doing at the moment, and I'm not here to speak for them, is they're rehousing a lot of the residents first, so their peak debt is quite early on in the projects, and a lot of the private housing comes at the end. They've delivered 2 phases already on 2 of the estates, and I think like the next phase and type path that would be next. Of course, projects come through viability, so the council took a decision. What's it last year? Could have been the year before, actually. I'm looking at every timelines with it was before or after. Where the council said it never gave up the clawback with a deposit until the scheme, until a positive admin position again, then the council would bring that back at that stage. What we have at the moment is with Clarion, working with their partners, Savills, we do an annual review of viability of schemes. Principally, that's to see if there could be more affordable housing response in the next phase, but that's also looking at financial performance. So at the moment, I would say that they're not in profit yet because of rehousing, but we're monitoring that annually to see where we'll come back. But it's a 10-year project.
And the next, the outline planning for the next phase went to Home Committee last week. Was approved, so that's good.
Stephen?
Yeah, so it's a very broad point. Obviously, you only tell me what you're able to, but when we were looking at budgets a number of months ago, we weren't able to talk about the pot of gold. And at that time, there was the 400 buildings planned for affordable housing and so on. Has there been is there at the moment any further plans for any further amount of development as a result of the pot of gold?
What we are looking at the moment is what I said on that asset review. So we're looking at the assets that we currently hold and looking at how we can be as self-sufficient as possible with those assets, looking at capital receipts and the mix of 10 years and things like that to see how self-sufficient we can be on the rest of the 400. So that work's ongoing at the moment. So at the moment, we haven't actually done the work on the viability to know exactly where we stand on that. So we'll be bringing something back in the autumn on what the remainder looks like. That's okay.
Great. Any other questions? If not, well, yeah. That was easy.
You've got to be doing a lot more than me.
I'm sorry for you giving me one.
Yeah, my question was, did your family mind it?
Well, I feel like, considering some of the topics we discussed there, I feel like it's really appropriate to have a very short toilet break now. So we'll be back in 10 minutes, so
We should know, yeah.
5-2.
So
Which one do you would be eaten out as a previous director that predated that was in the end, and it sounds like you're still there. You know, I can't see what's So who's in charge of facilities?
Me.
Oh, there's some new secrets in here, so in charge of that.
Yes,
Because these leads
Should we
might
go?
go from the table to,
Yeah.
they're not very far.
All right, so thanks very much, everyone. We've just got a couple more items to get through. So now, without further ado, if we're going to move on to the electric vehicle task group reports. And so if I can pass over to Lakshmi, so about some of the great work that she's been doing, chairing that panel and some of the recommendations that come on the other side. So over to you, Lakshmi.
Thank you for inviting me to speak. And these recommendations are going to cabinet. So read information, I guess. So as chair of the task force reviewing the fountains and the charging strategy, I'm pleased to put for you the recommendations from this cross-party working group. As a transition to EVs will support a reduction in the vehicular emissions that contribute toward climate change and local air pollution, and is in accordance with Merton's strategic objectives and policies. Merton will be developing an EV charging strategy, infrastructure strategy for publication until 2023. So to support this work at its first meeting, members of the EV task group agreed they wish to make recommendations that would help shape this important strategy. As a working group, we met and heard from the cabinet members for transport and future Merton to understand better what Merton was currently doing, the different types of charging offer available to residents, and its vision going forward for the borough. We've sought input from Transport for London, Parking Services and Gully to understand better how the home to off-street parking charging will work and be implemented here in Merton. We also looked at what other boroughs were doing to compare best practice. Members considered issues around locations, charging speeds, driver behaviour versus active traffic. The various costs of charging, as well as the increasing reported hazards to pedestrians by residents running charging cables across the footway. The task force felt that it was important for Merton Council to lead by example, work with housing associations to improve charging opportunities in the east of the borough, as currently there seems to be a higher concentration in the west. The task group have agreed and believe that these 12 recommendations before you are the most important, realistic and achievable, which should be incorporated in Merton's charging strategy.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Lakshmi. And one thing I also forgot to mention before introducing, just to thank all the members of the panel, many of who are here. So thanks to John, to Caroline, to Dan, Stephen and Slavek, and also to Matthew Willis, who's not on this panel. But thank you for all your work and for coming together to put those recommendations into the document. And I might maybe just, I know, Steve, if you only want to reflect on any of the work that was done and what we've done since.
Yes, no, thank you. I'd like to add my thanks to Lakshmi, who chaired your task group, to the members of the task group. And I want to confirm, as Lakshmi has stated, that on the 19th of June, the Cabinet met and agreed to these 12 recommendations, agreed for them to be rolled over into the EV charging strategy that we will very soon be kicking off. And there will be a pre-decision opportunity for you to look at that EV strategy. So there's a number of opportunities where your panel, your task group, the cabinet, the EV strategy are all going to continually discuss these 12 recommendations. What I'd like to do is to ask Paul to just bring us up to date with the latest states of play of EV charging, both rapid and overnight.
Yeah, thank you. Can I also pass my thanks on to the panel? I thought it was really useful, not only in terms of the content, but the timing of it, because the task group happened before the spec out for the strategy. We're now working through that, and that we brought back to this, but we adopt at the end of this year. So where the council's at now is we have appointed consultants to help us develop the EV charging strategy. that procurement's complete. We're just doing final T's and C's of contracts, but that's starting this month. That'll probably run through to the end of the year. So there's a lot of engagement with residents and stakeholders about charging options there. It's also looking to see what the demand is in the borough. So we've been really good actually this year, smashing the target. We'll all have over 500 charge points available to meet residents by next month. So that's a combination of the on-street chargers, lamp column chargers, rapids that are already in the borough, and ones that are in private land like retail parks and supermarkets. So we're quite well served. What we need to do now is say, well, where are we at now? Where do we need to be by 2025? Because we know at that point, internal combustion engines will be for sale. There'll still be legacy petrol and diesel cars around, but there'll be more electrics at that point. And by 2030, where do we need to be as a borough so that our residents are able to switch their cars, charge a car, and what options do we need to do in the highway and streets to keep them. So the strategy is in part about how far do we need to go and how do we get there. So that work's going to carry on through to the end of this year. Similarly, we're finishing the lamp column charger program at the moment. We've got other funding coming in the way as well, so we're partnering up with neighbouring boroughs, either Wandsworth or Sutton, over them, to do a joint procurement there as well. So that'll be for another lot of on-street chargers. So really well on the way, and it was a lot more to go as well.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Any questions from the panel on this? Dan, Stephen, Dan, take it away.
I wonder whether the use of supplementary planning documents was looked at as part of this task force. Right now, developments only need to provide 20% of their car parking spaces as EV. And am I right in thinking we could increase that minimum through a supplementary planning document? If so, how would we start working doing that? I guess through feedback and able to outline the process as well.
I'm sorry, I missed, Paul, what you were saying about the increased rollout of the rapids. I heard the broader point. Repeat the point about rapid charging. I thought that was still being worked on. And the point I have a query on, obviously I support the report we put forward, that actually put forward to the cabinet. And the query I had is that we sort of identified a supplier in our report to do the gullies. I'm not sure if we should really have been identifying a supplier. I mean, I think we should probably have been a bit broader and said this is the sort of thing we're interested in. And I wonder if we've considered any other suppliers.
Yeah, happy to say those three. So in terms of planning policy, a supplementary planning document can only give greater clarity on an existing policy. So it sounds more like you actually want to update a policy on number of EV chargers rather than give more detail on it. So I'll take that away until I think the new local plan will create a provision anyway, but it's not fully adopted yet. So the SPD itself wouldn't change that, but the policies can. With rapid chargers, so the moment the current rollout is the lamp column chargers, they're slow chargers, but that's fine for people parking at night and charging. We're in discussions with TfL. They want to roll out a network of rapid chargers. They've got 5 on their network in the borough at the moment. TfL realised right across London they need hubs rather than just the odd charger here and there. So we're looking at what lands might be available. TfL own land, spare highway land that we have. Undercroft of the A3, for example, that TfL own. If they want charging hubs, we're working with them on potential locations. But with the Levi funding, which we're applying for at the moment and looking to join the boroughs, that's about getting a greater range of charging available to our boroughs. So there may be rapids in that. And separate in our capital strategy for parking, we're going to put rapids in the council car parks. But again, with the asset review, seeing how long car parks there for, which ones are staying and what ones to be invested. So we will be looking at rapid chargers in car parks.
Sorry, just on that, we're also working with Go Ahead, the bus company, to see how we as a council can work with them, because they'll want to charge their buses. And obviously, they can't all go into Merton Bus Barrage and all be charged at the same time. So as they're making their journey through Merton, is there any way we can work with each other to accommodate?
And actually, yes.
Sorry, Stephen's final point was the Gully. Gully is a brand name owned by Oxford Council, who gave us their time in the task. It was really good to hear their experience. So it's a cable channel on the pavement, for want of a better word. We'll have to go to procurement if we want a supplier to do it for us, or we may want to invent or create our own product as well. we need to do a much deeper dive into that. So whilst the recommendation is we'll look at it, we need to look into the insurance issues around that, the trip hazards, who's responsible for it, how do we construct it, what's it offered to residents. So for example, like crossovers, we build it for them, would we offer that service to residents as well? So there's a deeper dive to be done on the channel, cable channels, but we'll look at it.
If we do go into a procurement process, we will declare this information to the others as well.
And actually, just anyone to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify if my report wasn't really clear, that we haven't recommended gulling. We've said to look at a like gulling or further. So there was something specific.
Thank you. Any other question? I know Miles' question. Anyone else? Mike has a question, and John. So Martin, after you.
Can I firstly welcome, obviously, the advancement there's been in the city work of the task group in this area. Clearly, obviously, the issue of gullies does need to be looked into, especially in terms of our access as well. But my question is obviously about the evolution of electric charging. Obviously, great strides forward in the past few years. And obviously, how can we adapt to a rapidly changing environment? We're obviously aware at the moment that a lot of charging are quite slow, get faster. It's obviously how flexible and agile can be if the need arises to adapt to changing circumstances, because obviously we're well aware that technology is evolving at a rapid pace in this area, and ensuring that we as a council are up to date. And it's it is challenging given the changes which are happening very quickly.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a good report, and I'm pleased that we're moving on as a borough with this as well. I've got a question about the reviewing once they've been installed. A couple of the earlier ones I noticed, and one particularly in Meadow Road in my ward, the little inspection hatch or whatever next to the lamppost when it was put in, it was one of the early ones. After about 6 months, that starts to build up and sort of rise from the ground a bit. And I just wondered whether that was a phenomenon that was just unique to the couple in my ward or it's across the borough, and whether it's the insulation stuff that was pumped in and maybe expanded over time. But I wonder if that's been so what are we doing to review the condition of those that have been put in, and also the usage of those that are put in, because they're going in lampposts where it was our best estimate of where they'd be needed, but are we monitoring the usage? So if there's a lamppost that's continually being used, are we going to put another one in, just down the road next to it, and one that's not being used? I'm not advocating taking it out, but not put another one next to it. And the sort of last point is about how can we look at planning and maybe the conversion of petrol stations into charging stations, because that it would be a shame if they just turned into charging stations as they stand with a supermarket or whatever. So are we looking to the potential for housing above charging stations? You wouldn't want to build over a petrol station, but you might be happier to build over an electric charging station.
And then John's point there.
I was on the task group, so the only point I was going to make is regarding recommendation 9, which says, given the increasing proportion of electric cars, to undertake a review of parking and permit charges. And I think that needs to be done still, because you get 80% of electric cars, you're not going to get the money that we're getting now. But I think we still ought to put something in to make sure that there's still an incentive for people to go to electric. Because by 2026, there won't be 80% electric, or 40% or something. So we need to make sure there's still an incentive.
In terms of technological changes, you're right, it's still a fast moving industry, Martin. That's why we get a range of charging options at the moment, and that's kind of the council just try to give as much options as possible to the public. That will evolve, and as part of the strategy, we want to hear back about what is the likely trajectory, not only in terms of what we need in terms of numbers, but the faster chargers now 4 kilowatt, that'll be 8 kilowatt before we know it. We need to look at, we have done it through a local plan, as we always do, about the capacity of the electricity and energy network, but that's usually for our housing demands. We now need to add in actually, if there's rapid chargers everywhere, what does that do to the grid in Merton, and can that sustain that growth too? So we do need a lot more work on the capacity of the grid in Merton for everyone being electric. So we'll keep that under review. The one you mentioned there about the payment lifting, that's the first I've heard of it, but if there's any specific you want us to look at, we'll go and see them. Going forward, because these are attached to lampposts, they should be picked up with their regular highway inspections. So town centres are inspected every month, most roads are met there every quarter or every year, and that's for footway and highway, but if there's any other road defects or the charges themselves in lamp column need attention, we should pick them up. Alternatively, if there's anything in your ward you want us to look at, let's see this. Yeah. In terms of usage, so the ones in lamp columns they're used by Chargy. We will get data from Chargy about how well they're used. The rollout at the moment has not been entirely random. We've had a database where residents have said, I want a charger in my street, and where we've been able to accommodate that, we can. A lot of it's been down to the electrical connections in the lamp columns themselves. So we tried to spread them out, but some lamp columns couldn't take the chargers, other ones have had to upgrade. So it's not completely random now, but I think we'll be able to spot where the hotspots are and invest more when we are able to do so. And with the petrol station forecourts, so Leeds' office, Steve and myself, we've written to all the petrol station operators in Merton, saying if you want to own a petrol station now, what are your plans to introduce electric charging now, or completely convert to EV charging hubs, which we've seen in Fulham and Greenwich for next one as well. We've written to retail parks as well, saying can they build more chargers into it. Not quite disappointed actually the replies from some of the petrol stations. They're just keeping petrol reserve for now. Clearly that's where the money is at the moment, but that will flip eventually. We're going to have to. Finally, the final point about building above them. There are some 1930s examples of flats above petrol stations in the Art Deco era in central London. Clearly, health and safety issues never built in there. I think the jury's still out about whether you could build over electric, because it does sound intuitive you could, because there's no fuel there. However, lithium-ion batteries, when they go on fire, they burn for hours. So actually, it's the petrol station maybe behind the vehicle if the battery goes is still a risk. Right. So I think there's still that may well be dealt with later. It's a good idea for future.
Any other questions on this?
And we'll try and break the usage by ward as well. So you.
Brilliant, thank you, Ray.
Question about the
Oh, yeah, no, fair point.
That's gone to the cabinet, so we'll be looking. No commitment, we'll be looking at.
Great. Like what I'll say is thanks to Lakshmi for chairing that task force and members, and also to Stephen and Paul for your help with that and answering those questions. So I'll move on to the next item now, which is on performance monitoring. And you might have noticed in the packs they do look a little bit different, performance monitoring this time. I guess you have to chat with Dan before you have to shoot off. But he did mention it's a iteration, they're kind of seeing how things go and taking on advice and comments and whatnot. So to maybe before we get on to the performance monitoring, it might be just good to hear about some of the changes. I don't know if you want to speak to us as well about some of the changes that we've made to the structure.
Yeah.
How that's reported.
So, I mean, obviously Dan and I are taking this on, so apologies we don't know all of the history and all the conversations that have gone on, but obviously we've been briefed on performance monitoring. What we tried to do here is to react to some of the comments that we've made, and probably two things to say. One is there's just a bit of a test example to pull out a bit more of an executive summary about what some of the highlights and issues that have gone on in the past quarter, and a bit more narrative rather than just I think previously you were just sort of getting arrows up and down, but provide a bit more narrative on that for you in terms of what sits behind some of those performance indicators. The other thing we've done as well is that we've focused more on just the corporate performance measures rather than a whole wealth of measures, some of which were just for directorate level only. So I think there's a question on, do we need to see all of these? There may not be enough for you now. So, I mean, these are the key ones that we talk about performance, but if there's particular indicators that you want to see or you want to know more about, do let us know. So that's really what we wanted to do, sort of just to try a different format to see if it was useful for people and the type of information they want to get through. And obviously we can ask questions about the content of it in a minute. The other thing to note as well
is that this was obviously the quarter four and the year end, so it was the previous directorate, so rather than the directorate down the line. And we are looking corporately about how the performance monitoring is done across the council corporately, and how we can streamline, make sort of, make sort of more dashboard type information. So we'll continue with this, but just to note that we are looking at corporately about how we can improve it across the board and also align it more closely to the new directorates as well.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think it looks like a really positive step in the right direction in terms of kind of making it a bit more understandable for people like me who aren't so great with just colours and numbers and ups and downs and errors and stuff. I think it definitely is kind of a picture now than it did before. But I really welcome any other comments in the room. Dan?
Yeah, general comment. I think it's much improved, and I agree with the approach you've taken so far. Highlights useful things where things have improved, or where things. I think so that shows a lot of good honesty. I imagine some councils like to hide bad things, but so it's good that you've included some of those. And the narrative is useful as well. So yeah, I think it's an improved way of doing it.
Yeah, thank you. Any other, Stephen?
Yeah, I think I registered my minor complaints to the chair about how these things appeared in the past, and I'm very grateful that they are more understandable now. One of the broader complaints I make, generally speaking, is that as councillors we're being forced to look at a ridiculous amount of information, and this is concentrating on what we need to look at to a greater degree. My personal inclination, you were saying, do we need more? My personal inclination would be to look at 5 or 6 indicators each meeting that were really important, rather than 50 or 100, and then we lose the important stuff in with the less important stuff. I don't know how we decide which those 5 or 10 are, and that's probably why we've got the list that we've got. But but if there's any way of us doing that, perhaps these are the top stuff, 5 pieces of information. Maybe that would be that would be something that you could take away from this if that interests you. But that's overall, it's fantastic. I'm an involvement in another group in which we're talking about how much time councillors spend and how much they get paid for the time they spend. And there is a lot of work where we don't get summaries or assistance, and this helps. So thank you very much.
Great, I'd answer those comments as well. Is any other reflections or comments on that? If not, let me know just a response.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think I'd agree with. So it's probably worth saying that the way that sort of the monthly and quarterly reported KPIs, that comes from a system, and it's actually very difficult to change that. So we are looking. So that wasn't a quick win in terms of the ups and down arrows and the acronyms and things like that, which is why I put a key in. But we are looking at ways in which we can actually improve that and make it more, as you say, a dashboard with the key things, here are the things you need to, that are good and bad. So again, it's much easier to read in 1 or 2 pages. So yeah, that's it's a bit, I don't know, but yes, absolutely, we're going to try and do that.
Great.
Yeah, just one on this whilst I was in the time, I'll say CRP 044 parking services. I didn't realise income would bounce back that much. I mean, we've been previously told over previous meetings over the last couple of years it was much lower than the figure that's shown here. So how have parking services managed to get back to that level of income, and where did that target 23 million come from? Because the last high watermark a few years ago was 20 million. So how are parking managing to do all this? And because there's a lot of people out there a bit suspicious, like cancelling reminders, so they end up paying fines. I'm intrigued to know how parking managing to making so much money.
So, I mean, Paul might be able to help on me, but I'll try and do something for Dan as well. But it's Dan doing it. But I mean, the parking revenue is still underperforming, so underperforming against its target. And it has been consistently underperforming against its target. So we're looking at whether or not actually that target should be regularized down, because actually if you've got a target you never hit, is that and you're continuing not to hit it, you're actually looking at is that the wrong target. I have to say, in terms of the history of that and why that is that the annual target 23, million as it's there. I would have, I'm afraid I don't have history on that, sorry, sort of 6 weeks in, we can come back to you on that. But I'm guessing it's the target that's been set. As you can see, it's underachieving a fair bit still. I mean, it seems to be going up a bit, yes, and whether or not that's to do with, you know, people.
From our performance boards, it's parking's in a different area, but I do understand it is underperforming compared to where we were with COVID. The uptick has been where we've had school streets, but even the compliance there is leveling off. So you'd expect that they could be up there, levels off again with compliance. So we're beginning to see that as well. So as I understand, they are still, you know, feeling recovered.
We can put a bit more in next time round with it.
It's a lot higher than it was only like 6 months ago, and a year ago. It's a lot longer.
Any other questions? Cameron, from you. Is anyone else want to ask a question? Just on anything you've been monitoring? Not over to Caroline.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question about parking. Really, basically, I do report a lot of miscreants of parking badly, parking in the wrong places, parking in disabled bays and all that, but very, very few fines happen. You know, I report it to the enforcement officers, and I think they do go out, but I provided photographs that the residents have taken and stuff like that with the number plates and all that. And when I've been past, those cars are still there, but they're not getting parking tickets. Is there any reason why?
I can take that to parking services and find out.
When
new residents get photos, that's helpful, but it's the council's own reported cameras that are as how we get tickets.
Oh, right.
So it's useful that you show us photos, but we can't find out the back of them.
So if a councillor reports a problem, then it's not really going to be.
The parking attendants should go out, depending on where they are in the borough, they should go out and investigate that. But the photos alone that he says then are helpful for us.
Well, it's not photos, it's my eyewitness reports. You know, I've actually seen it and taken the photos and said, this is there, I can see the car there. You know, can someone come out and give them a ticket? But that's not actually happening. So, yeah.
Great. Thanks, Kai. Any final questions on this monitoring? And if not, I might then move on to the next item, which is agreeing the work programme. I think, or you had something you already wanted to mention about the work programme. Was that okay? But
that goes as well first.
You want to make a suggestion about changing something around?
Well, let's just say one of the items in September's work programme is updating modern regen. But Lucy and I are working on that, and that will be feeding into cabinet around that time. So I thought it's probably premature for scrutiny whether we can move that to November. Or it'll be a pre-decision one, but even September means reports in August.
Okay.
We did mention what Dave's still on that.
It's only mentioned, so we're all right. Having just re-looked at it, too many M's.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we can mention.
Cool. Okay. Any wider comments on the work programme, or is everyone? I mean, I hope that's got a pretty good reflection of the conversation we had a few weeks ago and all the topics. I don't think there's anything missing from what we discussed there. So is that agreed?
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed. Okay. Fantastic. So I think
that we just have to change dates, the meetings now.
Yeah. Got that. The final thing to discuss today is on the task group. So obviously last year we did one on electric vehicles, which we just had the report on now. And there's been a few suggestions of topics, including retrofitting, accessible streets, and living together in close proximity. Before we get discussion on any of those, does anyone else have any other suggestions they're able to bring to the table? And if not, I'm going to throw my chair's hands to the arena about retrofitting. Why I think that'd be a fantastic task group to look at. At the moment, there's quite a substantial amount of money from the government and other sources that residents and social housing associations and lords can draw upon. But it's incredibly, I mean, I from my experience, really difficult to understand what exactly you can qualify for, how you, what the sort of criteria you need to meet. I think there's quite a lot of lack of awareness amongst residents, particularly those who might need it the most, about what the kind of support they can access. And so I think there's a really interesting piece around what we can do to make residents have a greater awareness about the opportunities they can to retrofit their homes. Obviously, as a topic, there's not many more pressing in terms of the council's own targets of reaching net zero, of tackling fuel poverty, but also what the council could be doing for its own estate, and some of the and supporting people in the borough to make this a priority for people to reduce emissions and reduce their energy bills. So that's kind of my personal pitch there for why I think a retrofitting task force would be really useful for the coming year, not least during the cost of living crisis. I think it's quite a poignant and timely one. But I'm also more than happy to listen to anyone who wants to. And I think Anthony, your suggestions on accessible streets and limited enterprise facilities. So you're welcome.
Yeah, no. So I think the way we approached this was to think about what was timely to what the council was doing, what was good and easy for the public and other groups to participate in. And so we suggested a couple of things, more straightforward, the others maybe a bit more interesting, but also a bit more tricky. So the first one was accessible streets. Obviously, we have the walking and cycling strategy coming up, so it's timely in terms of what the council is doing. The aim being to look at specific local problem areas or types of problems and best practice. It could attract really good public participation because it's one that anybody can be involved in, groups can be involved. So we thought there was some good stuff there to look at that would actually help the administration with its priority. So we do feel that accessibility is a big issue that Merton hasn't particularly looked at. I know we've also got a equality and diversity strategy coming up, so there's numerous kind of council strategies that we do. The other one, which is I think in some ways is more interesting, but is definitely more difficult, is around living together in close proximity. What I mean by that, if you look at your performance monitoring, you'll see ASB is up and the work of the antisocial behaviour team. You'll see that noise reports are up. You'll see that the number of member inquiries about planning and planning enforcement are up. All these things are because we are, as a population, kind of coming up against each other, needing help sorting out living together. Now that's only going to get worse as we intensify house building, as we need to do. There are going to be more of us living in closer proximity. And so we thought there could be some interesting opportunities that do fall, a number of which do fall within this panel's kind of responsibility. I think part of the problem is as well that it cuts across teams, and actually the public don't care, they just know they have a problem. But you could be dealing with environmental health, you could be dealing with waste, you could be dealing with the housing team, abandoned homes, you could be dealing with traffic and highways, you've got parking, tricky parking or abandoned cars. Most members of the public don't really care, they just want a problem, they want help. So we will be some good public participation.
Thanks, Nancy. Let me probably maybe hear the reflections also of Lucy and Paula. I think kind of amongst those suggestions, I mean, as Angie's mentioned, in terms of what the council's doing already and how useful some of those could be.
Yeah, a lot of the accessibility issues we've met Merton Centre for Independent Living, so we're aware of some of the accessibility issues, and the walking cycle strategy should certainly pick up on the engagement of that, but look at that same issue as well. So it's whether that becomes a separate issue here or it's part of the development of that strategy, which would feed back into this group anyway. I think also the living close proximity, there has been work done on selective licensing in the HMOs, but like you described there, a lot of that was multiple issues around the same area, and there's some evidence behind that anyway, so maybe that is something you can dig into. But the policy is there for the HMO, the houses multiple occupation areas. But we through that research, we have found certain neighbourhoods where one issue creates another, which residents feedback.
And retrofitting as well?
Retrofitting, I think, would be you can go into it. I don't think that's been to this group before though. I think the climate action plan comes here and we go to adopt it every year, but actually retrofitting, and again, because largely the biggest issue is buildings. Some are other councils and most are not other councils, so the strategy is how do we encourage greater retrofit across other public sector housing associations and residents.
It's the biggest It's our biggest.
But I think 80% of our emissions are building related. Yeah. Is there any other reflections? Dan, Stephen?
Yeah, I think the close proximity ones are partly interesting. It sounds like what Anthony has mentioned is basically joined up local government as a catchphrase. I also quite like the idea of looking at retrofitting suds and as well, because that's some of interest in areas of low-lying land, and we have quite a lot of that. So we can work out how to get more of that inserted, and I think that will be useful. So that's where I'm being.
Stephen?
So I had three thoughts. First thought I had was if these good folks are already volunteering themselves for feedback on more than regeneration, I think we should try and put something in for November to hear about that. You know, that was only taking advantage of apparent willingness. On the retrofitting, I think that's manageable in the same way that EV charging was manageable. So I would wholeheartedly agree with that. And for the same reason, not because I don't think it's laudable, but the idea of living closely together, and we try and examine it here, I think you're talking about a problem which is like this. And so trying to actually deal with it in a way which is sensible and measurable in 4 or 5 meetings of a small group of people, I think you're trying to take a task on, which is huge.
Any other reflections on task force suggestions? Martin?
I think I'd just probably like to concur with your views, Chair. You know, in terms of retrofitting, I think it's obviously an incredibly important area. I think obviously Anthony has raised some interesting points. Valid, we could ask the task, ask the scrutiny panel and look at further reports on this, but I think the retrofitting area is such a huge area, and I think it would actually benefit massively from having task force.
Great, thank you. So, Anthony.
Just on retrofitting, which I think is a good idea for the reasons you suggest, but how much work has already been done by, we have specific officers whose responsibility is building that work. How much work has already been done, and how does this fit? How could this fit what they're doing?
There's definitely enough to update. So we brought 2 other officers into the team to help with retrofitting specifically. Part of that's been back to residents and what the opportunities, also looking into the GLA and bringing in funding as well. So I think that there's enough. If you want to look at retrofit, there's enough we can bring in.
And I think certainly the issue that you raised about the fragmentation of the industry and the grants and everything that's around is certainly, I think, something that officers struggle with as well in terms of how best to, communicate that and things like that. So there could be some interesting work there.
Okay, well, I mean, I think maybe the best way to proceed is to have a just call votes and just go from there, unless anyone is standing out. So I might then go for retrofitting first. So all those in favour of doing a retrofitting task force. All those for accessible streets, and then living together in close proximity. Great. So, but thanks so much, Anthony, for bringing those 2. I think retrofitting task force. I think Rose, let us know what these next steps to getting that all together. But last thing, really, just thank you very much, everyone, for coming today. Next meeting on the 19th of September. So see you all in a few months' time. Cheers.